Okay, so in order to simplify each of these, we have to look for the factors. So number 1, when I look at 20, and you did this very well, I could look at that as 2 times 10, and then 10 is 2 times 5. So all of these numbers are prime numbers. So every pair of the same number, we bring that outside of the square root, and then whatever remains has to go underneath the square root. Number 2, you were doing this well. Square root of 81 is 9. 11 can't be simplified any further. We talked about that being a prime number, so that would be your final answer. For number 3, 12 is the only number underneath the square root. So I look at 4 times 3, and then I know the factors of 4 are 2 and 2. So there's my pair again. So putting it all back together, we would have 4 minus 2 times the square root of 3, all divided by 2. And then 2 divided by 2 is 1, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So your final answer would be 2 minus square root of 3. And you don't have to worry about dividing by that 1. Okay, and then number 4, when we look at the square root of 45, so we have 9 and 5. 5's already a prime number. Factors of 9 are 3 and 3. There's your pair. So I have negative 6 plus 3 times the square root of 5, all divided by 3 again. Simplifying, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1, negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. So my final answer would be negative 2 plus square root of 5. Okay, the next set, we did a few of these together. Evaluate the expression when x equals 2, y equals negative 3, and z equals 6. Okay, so just replacing them. X is 2, y is negative 3, and z is positive 6. Now, one thing we discussed, make sure you're putting that whole base in a set of parentheses, because when you square a negative number, right, my side work here, negative 3 times negative 3 gives me positive 9. So you get 2 plus 9 times 6. So 2 plus 54. So we get 56. And don't forget that you're taking the square root of it. So to simplify 56, I have 7 and 8. Factors of 8 are 4 and 2. Factors of 4 are 2 and 2. So now when I check this out, I have a pair of 2's, but I also have this 7 and 2, which don't have pairs. So when I go to put that back into the square root, my pair comes out front, and then the square root, I have to multiply whatever numbers remain. Okay, so the 7 and the 2 didn't have pairs, so they have to stay underneath the square root. And that gives me 2 times the square root of 14 as my final answer. And you have all of this work, so you can look at the work you did and then redo the problems, look at your work along with what I'm doing here. So substitution, 3 times x, which is 2, times z, which is 6, minus, and here we have that negative number squared again. Okay, so here I am. I got to square that. And remember your order of operations. Exponents come before multiplication. Okay, so that's going to be a minus 9 on the end, because negative 3 squared is 9. And then I subtract, and that should have been exponents before subtraction. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 times 3 is 36. Okay, so 36 minus 9 would give me 27. Now I'm taking the square root of that. So 27 has factors of 9 and 3. 9 can be factored further to 3 and 3. So I have my pair together. But then you have that 3 alone, okay, without a pair. So it would factor to, or simplify to 3 times the square root of 3. So that would be your final answer for 6. Okay, so number 7, exponent rules. So when you're multiplying like bases, you add the exponents together. So this would give me 3 to the 2 plus 4. So I have 3 to the 6th power. For number 8, you have one exponent raised to another exponent. That's when you multiply them together. So 8 would give you k to the 12th power. Number 9, you did this well. This becomes 4 to the negative 2 and y to the negative 2. Okay, and your rule for that is however many factors you have on the inside of a parenthesis, each factor needs to get whatever that exponent is. Now we have our second exponent rule. When they're negative, instead of multiplying by the common base, I'm going to divide by the common base. Okay, so I have to make both exponents positive, and be careful. Notice that that negative 2 becomes a positive 2 just by making it into a fraction. Okay, I didn't change the 4. The 4 stays positive 4. I just make it a fraction instead of a multiplication. So that negative 2 becomes positive 2, but the y itself didn't change at all. So I get 1 over 16 y squared. And then for number 10, using that same rule of distributing the exponent, r cubed over 2 cubed. So my final answer would be r cubed over 8. Okay, now these, which you also did well with. All right, the cube root of 27. So when you look at this, you're answering the question, what number, when multiplied by itself, three times gives an answer of 27. Okay, where did this 3 come from? The fact that you're taking the cube root. And this is where we literally sat there and we counted on our fingers. Okay, 2 times 2 times 2 is only 8. So the next thing to check, 3 times 3 times 3. And that would be my answer. So the cube root of 27 is 3. Number 12, you did well with these. This would be 16 to the 1st power. And then you have to take the 4th root of that answer. Okay, so notice, and bad color. The denominator becomes the root. Okay, so whatever's in the bottom, that's the root that you're taking. So now the question that you're answering, it's sort of like this, but I'm going to change it. What number, when multiplied by itself 4 times, gives an answer of 16? Okay, so I'm just changing what the root is, so I'm changing the multiplier. All right, so let's start with 2. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and another 4, and then 4 times 4 is 16. So there we go. The answer would just be 2. And remember, we talked about these answers aren't going to be huge numbers. 2, 3, 5, that's what you're looking for right now when you're taking the root. Okay. So now I have the cube root of 512, and then I'm going to square that. Okay, so I'm going to change my highlighter color. So number on the bottom becomes the root. Okay, and then the number on the top stays your square root. Your squaring power. So I'm taking the cube root. So again, find the number. What number, when multiplied by itself 3 times, will give you 512? Well, 2 is definitely not it. 3 is definitely not it. let's look at 4. 4 times 4 is 64. 64 times 4 would give me 256. Okay, so right, because that's 6 times 40 is 240. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so 4 is not going to work. I'm not even going to check 5 because 512 doesn't end in a 5 or a 0. So 6, 6, 6. 6 times 6 is 36. 36 times 6. Well, 3 times 6, that would give me 180 plus another 36. So that would give me 216. Okay, so that's not going to do it. Alright, so 7 times 7 times 7, I get 49 times 7. 7 times 40 would give me 280. 7 times 9 is 63. So that's not going to work. And for some of these, you just might have to do this. You might have to guess and check a little bit. But make sure if you're guessing an answer, you then check your selection as well. 8, 8, and 8. 8 times 8 is 64. Times another 8. So 6 times 8, that would give me 480. 8 times 4 is 32. So there's my 512. So it took a little bit of time, but we got the answer right. So now the inside, the cube root of 512 becomes 8. But then don't forget you have to square it. So 8 squared is 64. So the final answer to number 13 is 64. Okay, now let's go back. So now I'm taking 4 to the 5 halves. I'm just going to highlight that now. So I'm taking the square root of 4, and then I'm raising that answer to the 5th power. So the square root of 4 is 2, and then 2 to the 5th power, and this is where we were counting on our fingers, or you can write it out, but that would give you an answer of 32. So definitely watch this slide a few times. Do them on your own. Look at the ones we did together. All right, and then last one, you store blankets in a cedar chest. What's the volume? So volume of a rectangular prism, length times width times height. The order in which we multiply them does not matter. So I have square root of 10 times square root of 2 times square root of 3. Because I'm multiplying these, I can take the square root. I can write 1 square root. Okay, now that rule doesn't apply with plus signs, but that'll be a later lesson. So this gives me the square root of 60. Okay, gotta simplify that radical. So I get 6 and 10. 10 gives me 5 and 2, so 5 and 2 are prime numbers. 6 gives me 3 and 2, both of which are prime. So now let's see what goes underneath. So now notice you have a pair of 2's. They're the same. So whenever you have a pair, a 2 comes out front. Okay? And then what remains? You have to make sure that you're multiplying by whatever stays, doesn't have a pair. So what remains? 3 times 5. So 15 goes underneath the square root, and 2 root 15 would be my answer. So take a little bit of time to go over these things for yourself.